As of the release of this video, the Parasite Eve series consists of 3 games. There's Parasite Eve and Parasite Eve 2, both released on the PlayStation in 1998 and 2000 respectively. I've covered both of these games on this channel before, leaving us with the final game in the series, The Third Birthday, which came out 10 years after the sequel. Out of the 3 games, The Third Birthday has the notorious reputation of killing the Parasite Eve franchise entirely. It's not even an exaggeration, as we haven't seen a new entry since this game came out. So, to finally close this chapter, I had the luxury of playing through The Third Birthday, and after completing it, I wonder, what went wrong and how did Square Enix fumble such an innovative and unique franchise? After the release of Parasite Eve 2, Square Enix thought it had a conclusive ending that didn't really warrant another sequel, until 2007 where they would announce a 3rd installment to the series called The Third Birthday. Surprisingly, this game was initially planned to be released on mobile phones, however just a year later they would change the platform release from mobile to the PlayStation Portable. The idea for a 3rd game was discussed many of times, and it was none other than the character designer of Parasite Eve, Tetsuya Nomura, who proposed the idea once more just after the development of Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Nomura became the creative producer and concept/character designer for The Third Birthday. He wanted to direct it himself, but since he was busy working on other titles, he appointed Hajime Tabata as the game's director, who also directed Crisis Core. Nomura worked well with Tabata and felt at ease passing the role to him. In interviews, both of them expressed that they want to reintroduce and reinvent Aya Brea after a decade. On December 22, 2010, The Third Birthday gets released in Japan, then in March and April 2011 for America and Europe respectively. It actually had decent review scores, so what happened? How did it besmirch the franchise? Well, to put it bluntly, it's the ending. But before we get there, let's start from the beginning. It's Christmas Eve, 2012, Manhattan, New York City, 15 years later after the first game. A normal day just before Christmas until a sudden blackout occurs, followed by buildings collapsing as tentacles emerges out from underground. It's a catastrophe. There's mass casualties, the subway train's gonna be late again, and not even offshore is safe. We see the Statue of Liberty entangled and the title card appears. It kind of reminds me of the opening scene to Parasite Eve. These tentacles are officially dubbed by the government as the Babel, and we begin episode 0, which serves as the prologue and tutorial of the game. There are 7 episodes in total, and in episode 0, we're at the present day, exactly 1 year later. We're kind of thrown in the midst of things as we're introduced to new characters and concepts. Aya is now a special agent for the CTI, the Counter-Twisted Investigation, an organization that is investigating the Twisted, an alien-like race of monsters created from the Babel serving as the enemies of the game. Alongside her, we have Hyde Bor, chief of the CTI, Thelonious Gray, a former Delta Force soldier now CTI agent, and Dr. Blank, a CTI scientist lead of the technological division. They're all gathered in the Overdrive room, Overdrive being a core concept and mechanic of the game. Aya has the ability to swap consciousness to other people, and because of this, she could travel back to the past with the help of the Overdrive device created by the CTI, which we find out later in the game consists of components from the Babel. A lot of overwhelming information despite it being a couple of minutes into the game, and it probably raises a lot of questions like what happened to Aya's mitochondrial powers? Remember when I said they wanted to reintroduce and reinvent Aya? Well, they changed it completely. The Third Birthday takes a completely different direction compared to the previous 2 games. In fact, there is no mention of mitochondria or anything related from the previous 2 games except for returning characters. The Third Birthday is a standalone entry to the franchise, and this was intentional. Nomura himself in an interview said The Third Birthday was a new piece of content and not a sequel to Parasite Eve 2, hence why the 3rd installment isn't called Parasite Eve 3. Anyways, Aya gets sent back to the incident a year ago, now named as the Sacrifice Incident. We're here to find and destroy the Babel's core, called the Big Orb, as well as assisting with the National Guard. The thing is, back then, the National Guard got completely annihilated by a specific Twisted called the Reaper. So, it's up to us to somehow change the past as we take control of one of the National Guard soldiers and begin the gameplay. Once again, just like in Parasite Eve 2, the genre of gameplay has changed, this time a third-person shooter. We can move with the analog stick and control the camera with the D-pad, which on the PSP is kind of awkward since they're both next to each other, so you have to establish some kind of claw grip if you want to move yourself and the camera at the same time. If you're on an emulator, it's no problem since you can remap the controls. You can dodge roll up to 3 times, doing all 3 will leave you vulnerable for a second. Additionally, Aya has access to grenades and 4 weapon slots. When in combat, you lock on to enemies, unless you're using a sniper rifle which requires aiming. Now, Overdrive is a mechanic that separates itself from other third-person shooter games. I can switch to any other NPC, mainly soldiers if they're in the same room, and you can tell how many there are with you above your HP. Additionally, you can set up a crossfire attack with other soldiers who's behind cover if you lock on an enemy for a certain amount of time. When attacking an enemy, there's a chance for a weak spot to appear, and Aya can perform an overdive kill, overdiving in the enemy to deal a significant amount of damage. Also, weak points appear frequently when doing a crossfire attack. Underneath Aya's health is her liberation gauge, which builds up when damaging an enemy. Once full, you can activate it to go into a state where Aya's movement now evades enemy attacks, has 2 pistols that can now shoot unlimited energy shots, has an attack string that guarantees a weak point, and her overdrive kill damage is increased. At the beginning of the game, liberation will only last for 6 seconds, enough to do at least 1 full attack string and an overdrive kill follow-up. You can increase the duration by leveling up, however during your first playthrough you're not going to level up that much to make a noticeable difference unless you choose to really grind those levels. One cool tech that you can do is activating liberation when the bar isn't full. It will make Aya do this wincing animation, which at first doesn't seem useful, but if you do it just after the 3rd dodge roll before you go vulnerable, you can cut the recovery time, allowing you to cover a lot more distance. As mentioned a couple of seconds ago, there is a level system and bounty points also makes a return. You gain XP and BP by defeating enemies, and at the end of each episode you gain BP depending on several factors such as clear time, your deaths, difficulty, and special bonuses. Leveling up improves various stats like your HP, overdrive damage, and again the duration of liberation. BP can be used to purchase and upgrade weapons, and weapons can also be leveled up unlocking more upgrades. Difficulty also affects the amount of XP and BP gained. The harder the difficulty, the more you gain. Initially, there will be 3 difficulties to choose from: easy, normal, and hard. There are 2 other difficulties which you can unlock: deadly and insane, requiring you to complete the game on hard and then on deadly difficulty respectively. At first, I went with hard difficulty, however I noticed that I took some time defeating the enemies, so I decided to drop the difficulty to normal, and the difference was significant. The time to kill was a lot shorter and manageable. By design, the 3rd birthday wants you to play on lower difficulties for your first playthrough, since you can carry everything over into the next one. Just like his predecessor, there's replayability, where some unlockables require you to replay the game on different difficulties multiple times. I'll go through what you can unlock later on in the video. After completing the tutorial, a tired Aya encounters the Reaper. Fortunately, the guys at the Overdrive room can bring Aya's consciousness back to the present using a method called Ascent, concluding the episode. There are a few more things you can access as we enter episode 1, like the over energy settings, which allows us to put abilities on Aya. We can modify her DNA, represented as a 3x3 grid, where we can place these fragments called OE chips that have different abilities and configurations. You can acquire these chips as a drop when defeating enemies. There are multiple types of abilities, each represented as a color: blue for passive, purple for liberation, green for crossfire, orange for overdrive, yellow for overdrive kill, and red for malignant, basically a debuff. Combining a chip to an existing one on the grid can either level up the ability or transform the ability to a different one depending on the combination of the 2 abilities. You can level up these abilities up to 25, however Aya herself needs to be at least level 53. You can also change the outcome as many times you want to get a desired result. Despite malignant abilities being debuffs, you can combine them for other abilities. It's especially useful when you don't have the regular abilities for the combination. I suggest using a chart like this for all the possible combinations. Other areas within our headquarters are unlocked, like the locker room where you can change Aya's outfit. On your first playthrough, you only get 2 to choose from, the black leather or the white eider. These outfits are actually protective gear that has defense stats ranking from A to C, with A being the best. Majority of these outfits can be unlocked by completing the game on a certain difficulty or multiple times, incentivizing replayability. You'll notice that these outfits get torn over time when Aya accumulates damage. A decision by none other than Nomura, as he thought this would show a little more uniqueness compared to other third-person shooters released over in the West at the time. Overall, the gameplay is one of the positives of the 3rd birthday. The game was co-developed by Hexadrive, founded by former Capcom programmer Masakazu Matsushita. Square Enix's CEO at the time recommended Hexadrive to Tabata, as the company had staff members who previously worked on Lost Planet Extreme Condition, a sci-fi third-person shooter which also had decent review scores. Overdrive, being the core mechanic of the game, does not disappoint. One neat thing about it is that if Aya dies, you can overdrive to another NPC if they're in the same area, allowing you to avoid death. My only gripe with the gameplay is aiming when you're scoped in, especially with the sniper rifle. There's no sensitivity option, so you can't aim quickly, and you tend to over and under aim. Scoping in allows you to see the enemy's weak spot that you can shoot to deal massive damage. It doesn't help that some weak spots are hard to hit. Nevertheless, the sniper rifle is a viable option as it helps against certain enemies. One of the main plot points of the story is that Aya is an amnesiac, and throughout, she regains memories of the past, specifically an incident that happened on her wedding day. That's right, she's a married woman, as we see her wedding ring in the first episode. This incident is called Time Zero, which gets brought up at the end of episode 1, and this was the catalyst that started the events of the 3rd birthday. To get a better understanding, there are data files that you can access in episode 1, which includes the timeline of past events in the 3rd birthday, CTI members, the Twisted, the Babel, and notes that go through all the terminology that are used in the game. There's quite an abundance of files to read, and later on there will be email exchanges from certain characters as well. Since we'll be changing the past, in each episode the files will also change to reflect that. Thing is about these files is that you could go through the whole game without reading this, whether it's by accident or not. Honestly, it's probably for the best, especially after the game's ending, but it does provide all the information you need, filling out the gaps in the story. As for the characters in the story, we got returning characters from the previous games. First we have Eve Brer and Kyle Madigan, both introduced in Parasite Eve 2. At the end of the game, Aya adopts Eve as her younger sister and reunites with Kyle, who played a crucial role throughout the story. It's no surprise that in the third birthday, Kyle is Aya's fiancé. I mean, there was some chemistry in Parasite Eve 2, so I guess the devs wanted to carry that on. There's one more returning character, and that character is Kunihiko Maeda from Parasite Eve, who helped Aya against mitochondrial Eve. He appears later in episode 4, and his character has completely changed, but I won't get into him just yet. Aside from the new characters I have already introduced, there are a few others. In episode 1, we encounter Emily Jefferson, who mentions Time Zero. Emily is the final boss of the episode and the first person to turn into a unique Twisted, in air quotes. In the third birthday, humans can turn into Twisted, however Emily is a special case, and she's not exactly a Twisted, which I'll explain afterwards. It's worth mentioning that Emily is friends with Eve, which you find out in the data files. Finally, the last two characters that appear in the story are Hunter Owen and Gabrielle Monsini. Hunter is the head of the CTI, therefore our boss. He died in an incident where the Twisted obliterated the FBI branch, and he's one of the reasons why we return back to the sacrifice incident in episode 1. Gabrielle is a former SWAT sniper, now CTI agent, known for her sharpshooting skills. She also died in an incident protecting Aya after she got ambushed mid-training. We actually see her death in a flashback in episode 1. The two of them appear in episode 2 as Aya changed the past. The thing is about these characters is that they don't live long enough in the story for someone to be invested. Nearly everyone is dropping like flies as the story goes on. Returning back to Emily, I said she is a special case, and that's because she is part of a specific group called the High Ones. They're completely different to the Twisted, and they serve as the antagonists of the game. They were created in Time Zero, and I'll go through their existence in more detail once we reach the 5th and 6th episode. Aya faces against the High Ones in specific episodes consisting of 4 individuals. Emily in episode 1, Gabrielle in episode 2, Kyle in episode 4, and Hyde in episode 5 and 6. Out of all the High Ones, Hyde is the highest rank, serving as the main antagonist of the game. As for the rest of the story, we do have to go through each episode, but I'm going to try to give you a summary. A few details will be missed, but it's probably for the best. In episode 1, Aya overdives back to the sacrifice incident to a different location. There she encounters Emily, who turns into a High One, and after defeating her, Aya regains some of her memories, confirming a girl who looks like her. In episode 2, Aya has changed the past, but now Cray has died in an incident 3 days prior to the present. We get introduced to Hunter and Gabrielle, and Aya overdives to the incident, managing to save Cray. Near the end of the episode, Hunter has betrayed the CTI, as well as leading Aya to encounter a powerful foe, which we found out in the middle of the fight is Gabrielle in her High One form. As Aya defeats the past Gabrielle, the present Gabrielle gets erased out of existence, meaning no one will have memories of her, and this is the fate of all the High Ones. Aya regains memories of Eve, but not Kyle, who shows up, telling Aya that Eve is dead and her soul wanders through the gaps of time. He also tells her to meet him at the Babel in the Red Fog, which is our next location. In episode 3, now that Gabrielle is erased, Hunter is back dead, never making another appearance, but Cray is now alive. The CTI sets their eyes on the Red Fog incident that happened nearly a year prior. This incident was carried out by Captain Russo of the Delta Force team, who unfortunately got wiped out. Aya overdives to one of the soldiers of the incident as she gets led by Russo. At the end of the episode, Aya is led to the Babel's big orb where she sees Eve. At the overdive room, Blank scans Eve for data, but to no avail. He comes to the conclusion that Aya is seeing the possibility of Eve's existence. Captain Russo then shows up, but it turns out to be Cray who was impersonating him, as he was the one who killed Russo and his team. Cray explains that he did this for his daughter, who in the data files died at the age of 3 in an accident. Additionally, Cray was a former soldier of the Delta Force team and sole survivor of the incident, as he claims he was posting up his new position at the CTI. Cray does suffer the same fate as Emily and Gabrielle despite not having to fight him. However, it seems like he was initially meant to be a High One, because in his character file in episode 4, it states that Aya fatally shot him after he turned, which never happened. After Cray's death, Aya regains another piece of her memory. This time she remembers Kyle. Hyde begins Aya's ascent and Kyle appears. Before her ascent, Aya tells Kyle to help him protect Eve, to which Kyle assures her he will. In episode 4, things take a drastic turn as the story progresses 2 months later. In the present, we find Aya in a different location, in Maida's base of operations. Why? Because after changing the past in episode 3, on Christmas Day, the CTI was annihilated by Kyle, who destroyed the overdive device, preventing Aya to go back into the past, and killed all the CTI members, except for Hyde, who went missing. Somehow Aya reunited with Maida, resulting in this situation. Before we continue on the story, let's talk about Maida's character. In Parasite Eve, he was a shy and awkward person, however in the third birthday, his character did a 180 and now he's become a creep. He has this fixation on Aya because of her overdive abilities, and he's got some questionable lines like this, for example.
Can watch you and your vitals as you dive without any interruptions whatsoever. Just you and me. Yes, this is our chance. We can definitely get Eve back. Nubile body with your DNA. Fascinating.
Who thought this was a good idea? I understand it's been 15 years since the two met each other and people change, but was this change necessary to Maida's character? Anyways, despite changing the past multiple times, the current state of the world has become worse. Currently, the Pentagon has ordered a ground and air assault at the North Shallows Towers to take back New York City due to it being consumed by a Babel. Kyle was also spotted, now a key target, and so Aya heads over there to confront him. At the top of the tower, Aya eventually meets Kyle, where we of course face his High One form. After defeating him, Aya remembers a significant part of her memory, like her about to be married to Kyle, then being gunned down, and that she also turned her gun at Eve. Unfortunately, Aya cannot confirm whether or not she shot at Eve. As she regained her senses, she goes over to the dying Kyle, where he says that he wanted to protect Aya, but the Twisted took over him. Before dying, Kyle tells Aya that he's found it and that eternity is inside of her. Aya mourns his death, and the tower's Babel merges into one, creating the Grand Babel. In episode 5, we're back at Maida's base, and let me just show you the following scene.
The Babel is an overdive system?
That's indeed the case. Although it must be hard to believe. I know. Science is never wrong.
I can't even believe in myself, let alone...
Listen to me, Aya. You're here. You're real. If you're hurt, it's okay to cry. I mean it. Letting your emotions out will help heal your wounds. I know it will. How sweet your tears must taste.
What did my ears just fell upon? Anyways, here we finally get introduced to the concept of the High Ones, and Maida has found another one via satellite who plans to take over the Grand Babel. Looking into the satellite's footage, Aya recognizes that the High One is Hyde, and so she treks through the Grand Babel to stop him. Aya meets Hyde at the Grand Babel's Big Orb, where he first monologues that he's trapped in a time loop, destroying the Twisted from the future because the High Ones are at war with them, and when he falls, he wakes up at a church on a snowy day where the cycle repeats itself. Aya then asks why Hyde put her against the High Ones. He explains that every time a High One dies, the time-space power structure is consequently redesigned and the Babel grows stronger, allowing a way back to time zero. We end up having to fight Hyde, and after defeating him, Aya regains her memory, confirming that she did shoot at Eve. Shocked at this revelation, Hyde tells Aya that she shot at Eve to stop her awakening, calling Eve the mother. The High One's existence stems from the awakening of Eve, who were present at Aya's wedding, inheriting some memories from Eve's body. Aya believes that she could change the past if she overdives, but Hyde reveals that she's not the only one who can do that, as he overdives, taking Aya to time zero, concluding the episode. In episode 6, Aya encounters Hyde at the Rockefeller Center's ice skating ring as the two stand each other's way to meet the mother. Another battle against Hyde begins, and this one is different since initially Aya has no one to overdive to. As Aya's health whittles down to zero, Blank, Cray, Gabrielle, and Kyle shows up, encouraging her to continue the fight, allowing her to overdive to him. The rematch ensues, managing to defeat Hyde, but it's not over yet. He has a second phase, his High One form. Aya activates her liberation, substituting the gauge as her health. An easy fight compared to the last two, since you could just shoot and dodge at the same time. Finally, as we defeat Hyde, Aya overdives to time zero. So the final scene of the game has a copyright restriction, so I don't know if I can show you bits of it or not. We may have to do still images, but we'll see. Christmas Eve 2010. We see the guests outside the church as the wedding ceremony proceeds. We hear Eve congratulate Aya as we see the ceremony in Eve's perspective, and maybe you know what happens next. The soon-to-be married couple gets gunned down, and as Aya falls, Eve awakens her power, overdiving to her. Eve takes down the gunman in front of her as she questions who she really is. We hear Hyde's voice echoes, saying that the past repeats itself and returns Eve to her original vessel. That's right, we've been playing as Eve in Aya's body throughout the whole game. Hyde explains that time zero is when Eve overdived into Aya, which caused her to lose her memories. Despite wanting to save Aya, overdiving to her body actually destroyed her, scattering her soul to all corners of time and space, which created the Twisted. This also destroyed Eve's physical body, allowing the cycle to repeat itself and creating the High Ones. However, Hyde offers himself to fuse with Eve as an alternative path. This will advance their life form, ultimately ending the war with the Twisted as he watches a new future unfold. Eve asks what about the people important to her, but he doesn't give a rat's ass. Obviously, Eve doesn't want that to happen, and so Hyde tries to force Eve to become part of him. Then suddenly, he gets shot by Aya, whose soul has somehow returned. Hyde is baffled by the turn of events as Aya delivers a couple more shots, ending him. With her soul soul returned, Aya wants Eve to kill her to stop the creation of the Twisted, and also swap each other's soul by overdiving to stop the creation of the High Ones. Eve is reluctant, but eventually gets convinced as this is the only way to change Time Zero. The two initiate the plan, Aya in Eve's body and Eve in Aya's body. A heart-wrenching scene as the main theme of Parasite Eve plays in the background. You, the player, have to pull the trigger, and once you do, Eve hears Kyle's voice, who seems to be talking to Aya about how their love is eternity and all that jazz. A bright light emanates from the two, and we're back at the wedding ceremony in a new time axis. We see the two about to be married and hear Eve saying I do, but thankfully Kyle says otherwise as he somehow knows that the person in front of him is Eve. He tells her to live her own life as him and Aya will watch over her. He takes the wedding ring off from Eve, and before he leaves, he tells her happy birthday. Upon hearing that, Eve smiles and the credits roll by, the pastor probably concerned what just happened. The death of Aya is one of the biggest reasons why this game has such a reputation, a character assassination some may say. The fact that the third birthday was meant to reintroduce Aya Brea after a decade, only for it to be revealed that we're playing as Eve in Aya's body, and that Aya herself appears at the final scene of the game only for her to die is quite disappointing, especially for the fans who played through the previous games. Overall, the story was criticized for being confusing, messy, and weak. There's inconsistencies between the story and the data files, too much information in the data files that can accidentally be skipped. Also, finishing the game itself raises a lot of questions like, for example, who is the armored group that intrude in the wedding? Or what is this place called every time Aya overdives into a High One? Well, Square Enix created a Q&A section in an official art/guidebook called The Third Birthday Insider to answer these questions. It's only available in Japanese, but there is a translation online. Let's look at the answer for our questions. The first, who is the armored group that intrude in the wedding? There are many forces and conspiracies regarding Aya's powers. The group's identity is a national secret. They aren't allowed to say. So there's a mysterious third party who's after Aya, which raises more questions. The answer to our second question, the place that we keep seeing after defeating a High One, is called the Overdrive Space, apparently located in a space-time crevice. This was never explained in the game at all, and this is only 2 out of 26 questions in this Q&A. Honestly, that's not even enough, cause there's other unexplained questions like why did Aya and Hyde face each other at the Rockefeller Center's ice skating rink? Regardless, having to create a Q&A section for your game tells a lot about the story. So what can you do after completing the game? Well, if you beat the game a second time, you'll unlock a secret ending where we see Eve walking down a street. The snow begins to fall, to which Eve says, a gift from the two of them. We then see a woman walk past Eve, telling her happy birthday, it's your 4th, in Aya's voice. Surprised, Eve looks behind only to find no one. I believe this is open to interpretation, and I'll let you wonder what it means. Aside from that, to remind you once again, beating the game on hard difficulty will unlock the next difficulty, deadly, and then after deadly, you'll unlock insane. You can unlock some outfits by completing these difficulties, but there's one outfit called Lightning Custom, which is Lightning Farron's outfit from Final Fantasy XIII. And if you didn't know, Final Fantasy XIII came out a year prior to the third birthday. To unlock this outfit, you must complete 50% of feats in each episode on hard difficulty or higher. Feats are these side missions that are split into chapters in each episode and are quite varied. For example, some feats may want you to defeat a certain type of Twisted, or that you have to sustain reinforcements by preventing a certain amount of soldiers dying in a chapter. In Japan, the Lightning Custom was unlockable by registering your copy on the Square Enix website. Also, Aya's Japanese voice actress is Maya Sakamoto, who's the voice of Lightning Farron. Speaking of voices, the third birthday's got an interesting cast for the English voice acting. We got Yvonne Strahovski voicing Aya, known for playing as Sarah Walker in Chuck, and Serena Joy Waterford in The Handmaid's Tale, but you probably know her as Miranda Lawson in the Mass Effect series. We also got Jensen Ackles voicing Kyle, during the height of Supernatural mind you. No idea how Square Enix got him on. And lastly, we got Molly C. Quinn voicing Eve, known for playing Alexis Castle in Castle, and recently appeared in Death Stranding 2 as one of the preppers, La Madre. You can also unlock challenge codes, one of 2 cheat codes which require you to complete a set amount of feats on hard difficulty or higher. Challenge codes are there to make the game harder, like having limited weapons or no over energy. The other cheat code are called assist codes. There's only 3 of them, 2 that can be unlocked by spending 10,000 BP, high regen and free crossfire, allowing NPCs to crossfire without cover. The last assist code is infinite ammo, which can be unlocked by completing the game 10 times. Another thing you can unlock is a shower scene that can be viewed as early as episode 2. All you have to do is complete a specific feat in episode 1 depending on the difficulty you're playing. For example, on normal you have to complete the destroy all WADs feat. Once you've done that, the shower scene should be available in the locker room at the start of episode 2. This scene also has a copyright restriction just like the final scene. You can look it up online if you're curious, and this brings up another criticism of the game, which is the sexualization of Aya. Now, there's always been fan service of Aya from the previous games. There's artworks and even a shower scene in Parasite Eve 2. I don't mind fan service in games, however, we can safely say that the fan service in the third birthday is egregious compared to its predecessors. Aside from the costumes that we've touched upon, there's a third camera view called Secret that's purposely zoomed in behind Aya. To unlock it, you have to view the shower scene 10 times, and to unlock that scene, you need to complete the game 50 times, a big commitment to obtain this camera view. Additionally, because of Aya's change of personality due to playing as Eve all along, throughout the game she is gasping and moaning so much that you can make a compilation of it.
Begin ascent.
Roger that.
A problem I have is that in Parasite Eve 2, Eve is a clone of Aya created from a sample of her DNA, and the third birthday also acknowledges that. In the second game, before meeting Eve, there's an x-ray of Eve's skull stating that it's 15 months old. However, Aya says that the skull is at least of a 10-year-old. Therefore, if Eve is 15 months old in Parasite Eve 2, in 2014 when the third birthday started, she is technically a 15-year-old but biologically a 24-year-old. Since the third birthday is a standalone entry, maybe this detail is retconned or changed. For some reason, Aya's birthday was changed from 1972 to 1973 in the third birthday. It's a big oversight for sure, and the sexualization is just out of place for a series like Parasite Eve. As for the positives, aside from the gameplay, I want to bring up the music. Yoko Shimomura was the composer for Parasite Eve, and she makes a return back as one of the composers in the third birthday. Alongside are two other composers, Mitsuto Suzuki and Tsuyoshi Sekito, who both composed on many Square Enix's titles like the Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts series. The soundtrack has a few arranged songs from Parasite Eve, like for example, the battle theme, Arise Within You. Majority of the soundtrack was done by Suzuki, who's known for using a synthesizer in his music. It's a different style to Shimomura's work in Parasite Eve, however in my opinion he manages to capture the essence of the first game and is definitely an upgrade from Parasite Eve 2's soundtrack. Another positive is the boss fights. I had a fun time fighting against the bosses as well as the mid-bosses. The fights are unique and challenging, definitely the highlight of nearly every episode. I do want to give props to the ones who designed the twister and the high ones. Despite having a dull color palette, they did nail the otherworldly look. The last positive I want to mention is the graphics. The graphics are impressive, especially for a PSP game. The FMV cutscenes looks amazing, you can tell from the lighting, the shadows, and the details on the models like Aya's clothes and her weapons. Even the regular cutscenes using the in-game engine looks great. Of course, there's a notable difference in detail. It's been 15 years since the third birthday release, currently being the last entry to the Parasite Eve franchise. Online, people have said that Square Enix couldn't get the rights of Parasite Eve due to the author and or publisher of the novel, hence why they went with the third birthday. However, I don't believe there was any bad blood between them. I saw this tweet by I Finish a Video Game, who has done a lengthy retrospective video about the Parasite Eve series, and he explains that Square Enix still has the rights to Parasite Eve, like renewing filings in public registers, re-releasing Parasite Eve 1 and 2 on PSN in Japan, and earlier I mentioned that Nomura considers the third birthday not a sequel to the series. At the end of the tweet, he concludes that the reason why we don't have another Parasite Eve game is that no one at Square Enix wants to make one, and that all the people championed the original games has either left or moved on to other projects, which is true. There was an interview in 2017 with former producer and executive of Square Enix, Shinji Hashimoto, who was asked if there was going to be a reboot or sequel to the third birthday. He replied that it was up to Nomura to revive the series, and we know Nomura is busy working on other projects like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Kingdom Hearts 4. In 2024, there was an interview with Naoki Yoshida and Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was the producer of Parasite Eve. One of the questions asked was if there were any discussions within the company about continuing the series. Yoshida explains that creating a game requires someone to take the lead and commit to it. Square Enix today is a company comprised of fans of the games that Sakaguchi and his team has created. They probably wonder if this is something we should be doing. However, they have received feedback from fans and thinks the title could be made in many more ways with the current technology. It seems like there's no one who wants to fully commit to a sequel. In my opinion, you could either create Parasite Eve 3 or remake Parasite Eve, which I know some may roll their eyes to. Out of the three games, Parasite Eve is the most iconic. It was the start of Aya's saga, it had an interesting sci-fi story and a unique combat system that has inspired other developers, for example, Wicked Seed that got released this year, and upcoming games like Ether's Singularity, Parasite Mutant, and Fortified Bullet Power Bell and Bloodhound. It's such a shame that the series went downhill from Parasite Eve, and a remake or sequel could very well be the way to revive the series. But is Square Enix willing to take that risk? Is it worth it in their position? Will there be anyone who will take on that lead? For now, the Parasite Eve series continues on with such a legacy and remains dormant until further notice. And that's it for this video. A couple of months late to the actual 15th anniversary of the 3rd birthday, I've been busy in real life and was just slowly working through this video, and hopefully you enjoyed it. As for what's next on this channel, I think I'm going to change the format of these complete after X years videos going forward, and the videos like this one for example will be a separate series. Anyways, if you're interested in this content, be sure to check out the channel, like, comment and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you guys next time and catch you guys later. Take care.